Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our 1 o'clock p.m. briefing on the Committee on Housing for the Senate and the Committee on Housing for the House. I'm Vice Chair Troy Hashimoto. We have our Chair Stanley Chang here. We have our Chair Rep. Evson from the House and Vice Chair Micah Ayu. We are here today in room 225 to get an overview of the report that the Yes in My Backyard group produced, which was from Act 305 from 2022. I think this was a big priority for the housing chairs back then, and I think we were able to get that to the finish line, and the working group has been working very diligently, and I think we wanted to see what exactly came out of the working group to see what is our next steps. I attended a lot of them. I know Senator Chang attended a lot of them, and I think there was definitely a rocky start to it. I think there was a lot of arguments and disagreements on where we should focus, but I think at the end of the day, I think the focus became on what can we agree on, and I think one of the things we know we all can agree on is infrastructure, and I think it was an important collaboration to see what are the things that the legislature should be focusing on. And I think it also needed to encompass every single island. So we look forward to your presentation and to see what the working group came up with. So I'll turn it over to HHFTC and maybe you can introduce all of your folks.
Okay, my name is Dean Watasi. I'm the project manager for the Act 305 housing study. In addition, we have Dean Nakami, our executive director, and Hakeem from HBHA. So with me, I have Ann Boslugh and Tom Schnell. They're the consultant that helped us on this project, as well as Matt Nakamoto from PBR Hawaii. Okay, so today we're here to present the findings of the Act 305 housing study. Okay, so Act 305 established a Yes in My Backyard, or YIMBY working group to look at ways of increasing affordable housing. To that end, the working group held 3 meetings, 2 in 2022 and 1 last year. Okay, so this slide shows the working group members. And this slide shows all the members who at some point participated in the meetings. Okay, to recap the first working group meeting, a survey was sent out to all members asking them where they saw opportunities to increase the affordable housing project. So 12 areas were identified as shown on the slide here. Each member of the working group was then asked to identify their top 5 areas for focus. Okay, based on their input, the votes were tallied as shown. The working group identified infrastructure as the #1 challenge to affordable housing. Okay, with that, now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Ann.
Okay. Yeah, so the tool of this initiative, when it was handed to us, was to investigate infrastructure. But to look at infrastructure, we understand the goal of this is housing. So PBR began our study by identifying primary housing projects on every single island, developed some really extensive databases on those. And then we turned to our working group and we consulted with some of then Representative Hashimoto and other members of the legislature, as well as with OPSD and HHFTC. To identify the criteria to rank those. And this shows the criteria by which we ranked the housing. We used as a screening the first 3 criteria you see there. It had to have a public nexus, state or county. We looked for projects that were development ready, and criteria we used was occupancy within 5 years, at least for some of the units. We wanted projects that were being held up by infrastructure and for which financing of that infrastructure would make a difference. Not a project that was already funded or that was already underway or had some other impediment. And the next three criteria were areas that we favored. We favored projects with more units, and especially affordable housing units. We favored projects in some priority locations. Of course, West Maui was on everybody's mind. So an area that would benefit people who lost homes in West Maui. TOD areas have already been identified as priority areas, and other infill areas that might already be serviced. And we look for projects that might have some catalytic potential, and I'll explain that a little bit more in the context of specific projects. So once we had our projects ranked, we worked again with the working group and with the counties and some other resources and research we were able to do to match those with infrastructure need. And among those, we asked the working groups to highlight the one or two infrastructure projects in each county that they thought would be most impactful to generating housing in the near term. And I want to thank the working group members for all the diligence they did and really active participation by both state and county representatives at pretty high level. And especially having the county folks there was really helpful to get some ground truthing, some on the ground insights to the local context. So let's turn to Maui. In Maui, two geographic areas emerged as having the most planned housing. That was West Maui and Central Maui. But we tended to look towards Central Maui because of the planning, environmental, and other issues that are impeding immediate redevelopment in West Maui. There are also some projects in Central Maui that were really primed to move forward at scale. And we understand that Central Maui is proximate to the entrance to West Maui, and so perhaps it can provide some nearer term opportunities to replace some of what was lost in West Maui. The project that's highlighted there is actually a combination of two. One would be an extension of Wai'ale Road, and another would be the development of the Central Maui Wastewater Reclamation Facility. These two projects together would enable nearly 2,400 units. One is a large county project called Wai'ale South, which has 900 or so units. It's been planned and for some time. These are lands that the county bought from A&B some years ago, and they've been trying to convert to a workforce housing community. It also happens to benefit a even larger private development called Waikapu Country Town, which doesn't have a public nexus, but could provide a great deal of homes, including affordable housing. In addition to all of that, the project has a significant catalytic effect, we were told by county representatives, and that is that the wastewater treatment plant in Wailuku-Kahului is at capacity now. So they are somewhat impeded in carrying through the good projects they already have on the books there. By diverting some of the residential uses in this area to a new wastewater reclamation facility, it free up capacity in Wailuku-Kahului and allow development in both places. So the estimate we have here, unfortunately, right now is for the road extension only. It's about 72 million. Costs on the wastewater treatment facility are still being developed, but that project is moving forward in its planning. They recently released an EISPN. Can stop here if anybody wants to discuss Maui, any of this before I move on, or
Maybe, why don't you go through and then we can have a global discussion at the end.
Okay, what's also my drink break? Okay, so let's look at Kauai County now. And Kauai, the direct beneficiary of the highlighted project is also a county project. This is Kilauea Town, where the housing department there has been planning a project of about 200 or more units. It also needs a wastewater system, but as well as highway intersection, roads, water, and stormwater improvements. This is a significant project for the county of Kauai. And and includes a goal to test the 99-year lease ownership concept. So we thought it was pretty interesting for that. The cost estimate of all these projects combined is 38 million, which equates to about 190,000 per unit. Higher than the preliminary number we're seeing on Maui, but this project has a tremendous catalytic impact as well, because that whole area of Kauai has many, many homes that are currently serviced by cesspools. And as you know, they're required to convert, but without a wastewater treatment plant option, or another option, it's very difficult for them to do so. So the county hopes that this will really open the floodgates, if you will, on being able to start those needed conversions. I also note that the county had also sought a small contribution, and this is noted in our project as a highlighted project. It was just $2 million for a project to create new turn lanes and signals on the state highway in Eleele on south area. That would benefit about 400 more units at their Limaola project, which is a great project with an experienced developer. Would amount to only $5,000 per unit. It's not the highlighted project here because we last left off, we asked the county to see, given the scale of that, if it was something they could find funding for from DOT or some other means first. But if not, the working group did endorse that project as well and thought that would be a worthwhile support for Kauai County. Hawaii County. County of Hawaii has done a really great job in developing plans for primary resident housing throughout the island. They tend to be in 3 areas: Hilo, Waikoloa Village, whereas you know the county has a large piece of land that they inherited years ago, and in the Keahu'olu area. The highlighted project we have here is in Keahu'olu area. And that area we liked and favored because it's one that the county planning department endorsed in the recent study that OPSD sponsored on infrastructure finance. So that was the area that the county thought should be promoted and should have more investment in it. This whole area has a lot of state and county projects that have been hindered by both water access and other infrastructure. The project here would include wells, reservoirs, sewers, and off-site roadways and off-site parks, all of which would directly benefit Kamakana Villages, which is a joint venture partnership between HHFDC and Stanford Carr Development. It amounts to about 42,000 per unit. They have about 1,400 units remaining, which would be for rent and for sale. And about 600 of those would be affordable, and most of the others probably in workforce or market ranges. Also on the Big Island, the working group had highlighted a project which isn't shown here, which was to extend a road in the county's Kamakoa Nui project. That's not being highlighted here because the OHCD and the county informed us they've found funding for that project. But another highlighted project, which is not shown on the map, would be a second access road to Waikoloa Village. Right now, there's only one way in and out, and what happened in Lahaina makes us all acutely aware of the kind of dangers. South Kohala had fires on the same day Lahaina did. And right now you've got a large and growing community there with basically one way out in both directions. What the county would like to do is to fund a road to extend Paniolo Drive down to Queen Ka'ahumana Highway. And their estimate for that is about $30 million. Now to Oahu, big numbers. Geographically on Oahu, the Iwilei Kapalama area really stands out as the future nexus for higher density and larger scale residential development. It's got very significant state and county investments have been made over there in the last few years. 2 rail stops service the area. The city is underway with its Kapalama Canal Revitalization Project, which will make the area a lot more attractive and livable. And it's been very extensively studied over the last 5 or more years. TOD zoning is in place. Our firm and others have done very extensive stakeholder and community outreach over the years, and that's ongoing now. The infrastructure has been studied in the OPSD reports that I mentioned, and other studies have been accomplished, which makes the whole area quite ripe for redevelopment. But within Iwilei Kapalama, one little neighborhood that is most ripe for redevelopment is this intersection you see here of Liliha and King Streets, which shows 3 projects that really stand out in terms of housing production, their catalytic impact, their development readiness, and the public nexus. These include Mayor Wright Housing, planned for 2,100 units, being developed by High Ridge Costa with HPHA. And High Ridge Costa says that's their #1 first priority to develop on Oahu. It also includes Kukui Gardens, where EAH Housing is already on board as a developer with HHFTC. And the Liliha Civic Center, which is a joint venture project between HHFTC and DAGS, which would have 600 homes in 2 high-rise buildings and 270,000 square feet of new state office buildings, allowing the state to control some of its occupancy costs. The infrastructure need to promote all 3 of these projects together is about $84 million, which comes to less than $26,000 per planned unit and would directly benefit almost 3,300 units, as you can see there. If these infrastructure projects were to be funded on a project-by-project basis, as each project came up, the per unit cost could be 50, 70% or more higher. Doing them in a coordinated fashion achieves some very significant economies. And investing in this area, especially with the roads and developing some of the initial utility lines, which you can see are marked in color on these maps, will have a tremendous jump start to the rest of the Iwilei Kapalama area, which in total has about 4,000 more units being planned by HPHA and up to 7,000 units by private parties. So we think that is an extraordinary opportunity. And that's a summary of the highlighted projects. We'd be happy to take any of your questions about this. We have a lot more detailed information available here and in your handouts on the other projects that we looked at as candidates.
All right. Well, thank you for your overview and presentation. And we've got to thank our members who are here that served on the working group. Thank you, Mary Alice and Dean and Hakeem for being on there and sharing your information. And of course, HHFTC for all your coordination. I do want to recognize some of our members who are here. Rep Kila, thanks for being here. Rep Miyake, Rep Onishi, Rep Kitagawa, and our Majority Leader Kanuha. Thanks for being here today at this info briefing. So members, any questions? So I guess when you take a look at the all of the infrastructure that were requested by the counties and also the state agencies, what was the most common type of infrastructure that they were having problems with? Because I think sometimes you got to take a look and see, is that something that we can help with, or is there other funds that we can utilize, federal funds, right? But I guess was there a common denominator, or just did it differ from each county to county?
It varies, but as you can see, Kauai and Maui both have wastewater issues. Water's a recurring issue as well. Of course, it's an issue on the Big Island. And, you know, the Iwilei Kapalama area needs everything from bikeways and sidewalks and electrical upgrades and utilities. It's a little different animal from the others because it's a redevelopment, if you will. So it's very old infrastructure there that's not at all ready to accommodate the type of growth that we could have there with the rail stations and that the county and state would like to see.
Vice Chair, you go ahead.
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess just focusing on Oahu, when we talk about like just wastewater, for example, so the state would be funding a city expansion to the wastewater treatment plant. Is that what's being contemplated?
Well, most of these are city expenses, you know, these are mostly city utilities, you know, roads and the sidewalks as well as the wastewater facilities. So that's an issue that needs to be grappled with interjurisdictionally. And I think it's why OPSD has been studying these as well. And, you know, we all have an interest in moving affordable housing forward and need to find a way to get the jobs done. So short answer is yes.
I look at the development that's happening on Dillingham Boulevard, right? Rail development, the roads being torn up, that's causing a lot of stuff. Is the city taking into account what you have here and the infrastructure needs when they're moving electrical lines and digging up the road and putting in new things? Or are we only doing that with the sole focus of building rail, and then 2 years later when we decide to redevelop this area, then we have to do it all over again?
So I guess the question is from what your studies, what did you find? Is there
Right.
coordination or not? Or maybe Mayor Alice can come and address that too.
From our study, we did not address that. I think, you know, my guess is the city is under the gun to get rail done, and that's what they're doing. We do think that going forward, hope is that things not get done in one-off basis, you know, not one utility line, not all electrical now and water later. And that's why we were looking at this as a cluster, looking at it geographically. What would it take to develop this corner? And that was how we were trying to look at all these areas. You know, how could you really bring housing forth in an area most efficiently?
But part of your just a
sorry.
sec, but part of your session was, or your study was to look at the TOD study, right? That OPSD did and for some of their infrastructure, right?
This study was not charged with doing that.
Right.
It happened that my firm is
Right.
also supporting HRNA on the TOD finance study.
Right.
That was a study on how to finance
Right.
infrastructure. And we led the study in 2019 through 2021 or so on what infrastructure was required.
Okay.
And that's part of why we have such good data
Yeah.
on
So,
this.
Section Mayor, why don't you come up and maybe you can better explain this question, because I think it's a good one.
And
Yeah,
I think
go
that
ahead.
there's some discussion about coordination, and I only bring this up because Mayor Blangiardi was at a hearing 2 days ago, and he talked about wanting to move House Bill 1808, which is to give the county authority to do mixed-use development rights. And if we're talking about this like piecemeal development, why would we want to do this and not just let HHFDC kind of dictate how we move infrastructure forward, you know, on a state level rather than, you know, on a state and county and, you know, private enterprise level?
Representative,
Oh, maybe you can pull the mic and then introduce yourself real quick.
okay, I'm Mary Alice Evans. I'm the interim director of the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development in DBED, and a sister agency with HHFDC and HPHA, working on a variety of ways to increase housing for local families. The study that Anne was referring to did look at new financing tools, some of which would benefit the counties. Some would also bring new funding into the state coffers for housing specifically, housing infrastructure. So to your point, Representative, the TOD Council is a partnership between the counties and the state. And when we identify an area that is a focus area and we award some of the money that the legislature appropriates to the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development, it is to coordinate the planning for infrastructure for new housing between the county and the state so that, as you say, they shouldn't be two separate paths. They should be coordinated paths. So that's a legislative appropriation that you give to the Office of Planning that we in turn then award to either county, state agencies as the lead to work in a partnership in these areas. So about half of them have gone to county agencies and half have gone to state agencies, but they all work together.
So I guess how much oversight or control do we have when we give the money away, as far as, you know, planning for the future or like coordination? Like say we give the county money for wastewater treatment plant for this area. Like, are they guaranteeing us capacity when we build out the civic center? Like, are they guaranteeing us, or are they going to just prioritize, you know, whatever project they have in Iwalei over, you know, some of these other projects that we're looking at for HPHA?
When we award planning funds, we control the scope of work, and the scope of work will require either the county or the state that accepts the funds to follow that scope, which will involve coordination. When the facility is constructed and deemed ready for service, and it is a county-run facility, that's out beyond what our scope of work can control. But it's a good question, and it's certainly one that we should be thinking ahead and looking at. But so thank you for the question.
Well, maybe what we should do is let's bring, I know hard to put you on the spot, Hakeem, but why don't you come up and why don't we talk about maybe in practice, Hakeem, of what is going on at Mayor Wright, since it's a part of the scope of this study, to see if you believe the coordination is there, right, in terms of some of the pieces coming together to give you all of the infrastructure needs to make Mayor Wright go, because that's the biggest piece of this, you know, Iwalei area is Mayor Wright is the anchor, right? And in order for you to do it, you're going to need all these pieces. And I assume you kind of know what are the hangups, right? So at least it gives us you know, one specific project that we're invested in that you can tell us what are the hangups there.
Great. Hello, everyone. Hakeem Warsafi, Hawaii Public Housing Authority. And as you know, we sent a spy to City and County. Craig Hirai, he's back with us, so he can tell us behind the scene what's happening in City and County. Okay, that's a joke.
Well, they got a spy, so Denise is over there now.
So practically what we have seen, there is definitely a greater level of cooperation and collaboration from the City and County, from DPP, Don, the man, and everybody else. So we have seen them meeting with us often, trying to find out what the issues are, bringing all their people together, try to help us. So I've seen that, which is very, very encouraging. And the infrastructure is definitely a problem, besides the funding to actually fund those things. Currently, right now, we're planning on bringing in 916 units, 350 light tech, 307 light tech, 352 missing middle, and of course, 250 for sale 99-year lease. That's 916. The initial feedback we got is that we may not have the whole infrastructure for the 916, by maybe 6 or 7, but they went back and they're trying to work together, the mayor's office and everybody else, to kind of accommodate us to be able to move forward. So there is a huge need, as everybody said, you see it. There's a lot of things that you can expedite, but you're not able to, so you have to slow down. On the positive is that truly I have seen more collaboration than I have ever seen in the last year and a half, last 2 years, and that's really trying to find what the issues are and bringing together, say, how about if you do this and forget this, do this one here. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but that's in the practical sense of it, that's what's been happening.
Because your plan is to wait for city sewer, and then the state is, we're trying to take care of electrical, right? Is that your understanding?
Yeah, so there is an ongoing through The electrical upgrade is happening, but we do feel we have enough electrical right now for the phase one. For this, we don't have neither water nor electrical for phase 2 and 3. So the maximum that we could generate through this is about 900 units out of 2,458 for that one site.
And then when we talk about sewer, do you have line capacity, or is it not line capacity, or is it wastewater treatment facility capacity that's the issue?
I believe they built a new treatment facility that's going to come online sometime soon if it hasn't already. Craig, do you have information?
There's gross sewer.
Yeah, why don't you come up, Craig?
Can I go?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll I'm
I know,
asking,
sorry.
I'm asking because right, Dillingham is being redone. Like if we're putting in the same size line or whatever, and you need more capacity, that doesn't make sense. I mean, if it's wastewater treatment plant, that's different.
I don't think.
Well,
I'm
introduce yourself, Craig.
I don't think I'm disclosing anything that's confidential.
Well, introduce yourself. Real
Oh,
quick.
I'm Craig Hurai, the Executive Assistant at HHFDC. Formerly the Chief of Affordable Housing Policy and Strategy at DPP at the city last week. So, yeah, no, there's gross sewer capacity. It's not like, say, the stadium where they're waiting for the main line to come in from Honolulu to Halawa. Because they put in essentially a bypass sewer down Waikimelo, there is gross sewer capacity, my understanding, in Evilea. It's just, I think, we're saying that, the laterals and things are 100 years old and they all need to be replaced. So, but there is gross sewer capacity, is my understanding. The person who's not here today is Craig Nakamoto from HCDA. They have $25 million for electrical upgrades. They're working with the city to coordinate that. And part of that is to service the projects that the mayor was talking about at the info briefing and Mayor Wright. So, I think the electrical is being planned, but that has to be coordinated with HART because there's a lot of stuff going on Ka'ahi Street by the rail station. So, but they are, it's like Hakeem says, they are coordinating.
Okay.
That's correct.
So do you get to reserve the capacity? Because I know that there's a lot happening that's not even highlighted in this area, right? The city is looking at Evilea redevelopment. Kamehameha Schools is looking at Dillingham redevelopment. So is your capacity reserved, or are you also competing at the same time against everyone else that wants to develop in this area on capacity?
Yeah, hold on.
Years ago, we did, for example, for Mayor Wright, we gave them in that area, we anticipate to put 2,500 units. And I think that was maybe 7 years ago. So they are aware of the capacity. And prior to embarking on any project, we hire a consultant that looks the current conditions and that fashions the phase 1 and phase 2 and phase 3. And then we contact them directly and get a letter confirming a certain amount for that specific phase that you want, the availability.
I guess what I was going to say was the city has a $11 billion 20-year wastewater facility improvement plan that's maybe halfway done. It's in progress. It's in motion. So, it's I think sewer, is being taken, well, not taken care of, but I mean, there's gross sewer capacity. It's just the laterals and things, which is no small job if you're trying to go across King Street or something. But they're working. My understanding is they're aware of it. They're working on it. So,
another one would be the actual water. Because of Red Hill, we were contacted by Board of Water Supply that the letter that they sent is no longer valid because there is not that much water. So that's another issue.
Then, so the HCDA is working on electrical. I think that one goes from the Evilea substation to Kapalama Canal. So KS, ideally.
I guess my last question, I just want to make sure the investment is happening one time, like we look at everything, we look at HART, we look at, we're investing in it one time as opposed to HPH is investing in it and Hart and the state is all investing in it and it's like all happening at different times.
So that's the plan.
Okay.
Because, yeah, it gets electrical in particular, well, everything gets very congested on Hawai'i Street.
And the TOD committee has all the stakeholders.
Okay.
Rep Keela, go ahead.
I know, I think like us as the legislature, you can say that. I know we have to support a lot of these like affordable housing projects, right? But when I'm looking at the $84 million that goes into redevelopment of Kukui, Mayor Wright, and the Liha, well, yeah. How long have you folks been asking for this kind of funding to put forward?
Yeah.
It,
I only looked at her because she's been working on.
Oh, okay,
but it also depends on the county.
okay.
For the mic, please.
Marielle Evans again.
Hi.
The TOD council was created by the legislature in 2014, and it fairly soon identified infrastructure bottlenecks
Right.
in developing housing, infill housing in around rail stations. And we did a study with PDR and other consultants to start costing out the infrastructure. So we do have an overall view of what those costs would have been, and we had that and made it available to the legislature. I think in our TOD annual report, probably in 2020. Was that about right? 21 session. Yeah. So, but these are big amounts, and what considering that's why we asked the legislature for a small additional amount to look for creative financing strategies, because those are large numbers. And one of the strategies that we have, a bill in the admin package, which was introduced on Monday afternoon, is to give the counties the ability to bond fund increased tax increment financing, that's increases in property tax. So that would be a county contribution to the cost of this infrastructure. And then we have another bill for your consideration, which would allocate some portion of the conveyance tax to funding to HHFDC to fund some of this infrastructure. So it would be, what we're envisioning is both county and state contributions to come up with these common area infrastructure that will unlock housing. So we do have the numbers. They of course change because of increases in financing costs and materials costs. So they have to be updated on a regular basis. Does that answer your question?
Kind of. What, to your point, right? We're talking about like unlocking housing. My only concern is that I feel like we constantly as a state are looked to solving the housing crisis. And we know people can't even qualify for affordable housing because they make $5 more than what's being required. And we're having to upgrade every single facility to meet the need that already is being fulfilled to the extent. But I'm looking at these neighborhoods that aren't even at capacity. And I know to the extent you folks are talking about these projects, but you folks have had to examine, I think, some of the issues with zoning, because there are, to be frank, that there are neighborhoods who are not even at capacity in the urban core that can help alleviate some of this issue. And we keep building for the folks who need affordable housing, but we're missing that market in some capacity. So I think for me, like, it's frustrating that we keep having to move the needle forward, but this is not even the overarching solution in retrospect of all of it. So I know you folks are doing it. I just think it's frustrating to see we have to invest all these dollars and they're still going to be missing. We're still missing a larger population. And I know you folks know that zoning reform is a conversation this legislative session. And I think that should be another aspect to talk about, because there are other smaller entities. I'm looking to the neighborhoods that can sustain 1 or 2 more dwelling units on their property that can answer some of the needs that are existing right now. So I just think that's my point.
Thank you,
Chair.
Rep. Kila. Chair, go ahead.
Yeah, as a follow-up to Rep. Kila's question, and maybe this is for Anne or possibly Mary Alice. The report does mention, it said along with infrastructure, there emerged consensus that zoning ordinances were a priority concern for working group members. And then the report has this short white paper detailing some of the initiatives in California to reform their zoning codes. But then the recommendations in that white paper were, I'd say, pretty vague. You know, it says eliminate or reduce inconsistencies across counties, reduce discretionary review, increase by right construction. But it doesn't actually go further than that or highlight any of, say, the California examples that would work here. So the question is, you know, do you guys have more concrete recommendations when it comes to zoning reform, or is that something that you folks are going to be working on in the future through the working group?
We'd have to do that in the future. The focus that was given to us was primarily to nail the infrastructure issue here. And, you know, as you saw, we were asked to do a high-level overview of some of the Yes in My Backyard initiatives, especially in California. So that's what you see in that white paper. I think those are pretty new too. So, you know, in the next year or two might be a good time. It's more ripe to see what effect those have actually had and how helpful they've been. I do think the whole infill issue is another area worthy of study that wasn't part of this scope.
Okay. And I'll add on to that is, I think as a member of the committee, we tried to do concrete pieces of legislation, and I think then it ended up where everybody was just fighting. So we had to find some common ground, and I think this was the common ground that more people could get on board with. So very interesting dynamic. You're going to take the place so you can see the fighting at some point. Vice Chair.
So I see the last working group met after the governor's EP on housing. What did that change the conversation at all? I mean, I know you brought up tax increment financing. Can the working group approve a tax increment financing plan? Can the counties take it on through the EP, or what was the discussion after the housing EP in this working group?
The EP can't waive the concern about tax increment financing. It's either going to have to be the legislature and the voters or the Attorney General's office. The EP is working with specific projects that want to come in under the exemptions to the extent necessary of specific laws that are on the books now. So the goal there is to definitely expedite shovel-ready projects. And so, and it can include infrastructure projects that's specific in the
Yes. You can go. I'll figure out what my question
Okay.
is.
Rep. Onishi, you had something. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions. First of all, when I look at the list of members and identified stakeholders, I don't see any utilities on here. Why were they excluded?
Yeah, I guess they weren't part of the original list, and I guess going forward, we can include those parties. Yeah, because the YIMBY group is still active.
I mean, you're looking at infrastructure. I mean, they're a big part of infrastructure and infrastructure costs. And you talked about utilities on Oahu. And, you know, I mean, you would think you would need them at the table to discuss that particular issue. One of the other things I don't see, especially for the county of Hawaii, and I don't know the other counties, there's no wastewater people on their representation. They got like housing people and 2 planning people. And one of the biggest problems on Hawaii Island is wastewater. You know, I mean, I don't know how you do these types of decisions without key people being at the table. And granted, you may have representation from the larger group, but they don't know all of the idiosyncrasies about the development of those types of infrastructure and their particular island and the needs. So, and then finally, you guys have costs, but I don't see any breakdown on how that cost is divided up amongst the issues. Like, for example, on the city and county of Honolulu, you have electrical, roadway, walkway, bikeway, drainage, water, sewer facilities. 84 million. What's the breakdown? And the issue is, how do we pay for this, right? What is funding that can be brought in from the federal government? Infrastructure money? How much, when you look at sewer systems, it's costs is recouped by fees, right? Electrical, the utilities have funding to expand electrical development because they collect, the costs for the infrastructure development. It looks like we got to pay $84 million, which I think, it's not realistic. We don't have this breakdown for us to make reasonable decisions as to how much is this actually going to cost, to the state versus the county versus utilities versus federal funding available. I don't know if you guys did this, but it's obviously not here in this report.
But really good questions. We do have that breakout for most of these numbers where we got them. I'm not sure if it made it into the final report or not, but we do have them in our work papers with that sort of breakout. And it's a good point. It would be meaningful to you, whether you're sitting at the state side, the county side, or utility side, to know which is whose. So, what we have can be made available. And with respect to some of the agencies that weren't represented, a lot of times we were relying on, let's say, someone from the planning department or someone from the Department of Public Works to make the inquiries with their sister agencies who did not want to come sit in a working group meeting. So, we were relying on them to talk to ENV or whoever it may be to get some of their insights. But you're right, they were not sitting at the table.
Okay. Anybody else has anything? Oh, we got talking to the mic, if you want to say something. Yeah.
Yep. To your point, Onishi, in the some of the earlier studies that identified infrastructure, one of the consultants was an electrical engineer who could cost out what some of the electrical expansion of capacity would do. So yes, in my backyard is one step in the legislature's inquiry into how to increase housing, but between the TOD Council and its previous infrastructure studies and others, we have tried to involve the utilities, talk to Hawaiian Electric, HECO, and others. So the information that we gathered from them are captured in other reports besides this overview, but we have made them available to the legislature. They come in our annual reports.
Okay, members, any other questions? Oh,
Can I follow up? So I'm looking at this ROM project cost per unit, 25,600. Is that cost going to get passed on to each unit owner, or Hakeem, how do you envision this breaking down as far as like the for sale, and or are we not even looking at it on a per unit cost? I'm not sure why is this illustrated in the report as far as per unit cost?
I believe it's been put there just to put it in perspective. If that investment is made, it will translate to the 25,000. For us, for example, what we're doing, if this doesn't get taken care of, it's going to go into the construction cost, and this and that determined. So one way or the other, the developers, whatever is not paid by the state gets passed on to either the renters or the homeowners.
Yeah, but I guess I'm just trying to figure out how like what units are bearing the cost, right? Because you can only charge a certain amount for some of your HPHA units, right? Or all of them, I think, right? So
Correct.
you're not going to tack on, I mean, each unit is not going to get the same costs sharing as a regular for sale unit at market versus like your units, right? So I'm trying to figure out who's sharing the cost of the.
So is the question, if this doesn't get funded by the state and the developers do it, they will pass it on either through rent or through the people. Yeah, they will not take $84 million. They're probably not even making that in their profits, so they will pass it on. And that's why we go, for example, like school impact fees, same thing, that $9,000 per unit. If they pay it, they end up, it just increases that cost of the unit. And ultimately, instead of just, for example, if this is done and it costs $500,000, they'll still sell it at $500,000 plus profit. But if it costs them $680 because they paid for all of that, they'll sell it at $680 plus the profit.
But I think, Hakeem, part of the situational awareness for everyone is that I think if we don't do the regional infrastructure upgrades, you probably would just be stuck at 400 or 600 units, right? Because you wouldn't be able to afford all the electrical upgrades or the sewer upgrades, right?
No, nor would it be fair for us to do for Mayorite, for example, for 2,500 and pay 80 million. Somebody comes behind us, it's just attached to it. So and it'll stop. We won't even have a path forward because nobody's going to want to touch it. No bank was going to finance something that's not going to be built.
Right.
So this is crucial to be available.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Raponishi.
Yeah. I have a follow-up question to the question that Representative Ayala asked, which I don't think was answered. He asked the question, if I'm phrasing it correctly, when these upgrades are made, even though we have, say, a 5 or 7 year timeline for development, is that capacity reserved for your project? So if a private entity comes in the same area and says, hey, I got the funds to do this right now, do then they take your capacity and then we got to go back and fund some more capacity?
So I don't believe that the city only build based on numbers alone.
I understand that, but
no, I'm sorry.
You didn't answer the question. It's either yes or no. That capacity is reserved for us into the future. If we're not going to do the project, then it gets released. But we don't have to, the state doesn't have to go back and fund another upgrade for something we already funded.
No, I understand. The capacity that they built a capacity that is anticipated for the next 20, 30 something years. And that includes ours, any others that are anticipated, plus.
Okay.
And then it starts giving to those who are ready for it.
Okay.
So if, for example, we say 2,500 and 10 developers came after us and they're ready for that project to deliver those units, they will be given that permit. They will not say, this is reserved for this entity. Just let us know whenever you're ready.
So do we get our money back by the developer?
No. So again, this one here is to identify the impediment. One of the impediment that's highlighted still on screen is this for any housing, from any entity to be able to move forward. So I don't think the city will charge. They charge certain fees, connection fees and other fees to get some of their costs, but they don't specifically charge this 84 million divided.
Well,
by
they
year.
do impact fees, right?
Sure, yeah,
And we can do impact fees.
this
Right.
legislature can do, yeah, anything they'd like.
And that was a
Absolutely.
way to reimburse us for expenses we put up front
Sure.
or we have to develop. So, I mean, that's my question is, do we get those fees back? So if we do this improvement, and then all the private guys come in and they do all the development, what happens to our projects? And do we have to pay again?
I think
to upgrade?
what happens, whatever the legislation wants, whatever you put in that bill or law, that's what's going to happen. If we are mandated to charge developers for, I just don't even know how to answer that other than in general, the infrastructure usually it's done by governmental agencies and entities and counties to be able to encourage developers to come and build housing.
Well, I mean, there was a
how they
lesson learned
collect-
from Kaka'ako,
I'm sorry?
right? There's a lesson to be learned from the development of Kaka'ako. The state paid upfront for infrastructure development, right? Almost all of it's privately investment and development. How much have we recouped the cost of our initial investment? How much is the city making over taxes that they were opposed to that development?
I'm not sure that's the HPHA question.
Yeah, no,
Well, I
think
know, but
we'll
all
probably
I'm
have to-
talking
we could
about is
bring in
all these
HCDA.
projects,
Right, right.
I mean, we can't just keep funding project after project and get no benefit, I mean,
We'll be happy if
Okay.
you just
Yeah.
fund ours.
Just-
Yeah, no, I think your point is well
Yeah,
taken, Rep. Onishi, and I think that is why anything that this group was tasked to do with was to make sure that there's a state nexus, right, to any of it. And one of the biggest state nexus is our HPHA our project of Mayor Wright, and then of course there's the other HHFDC projects. But I think your point is definitely well taken, and hopefully the housing agencies know that. I think that's mainly a Mary Alice thing when she's doing regional planning, and also to HCDA. But members, any other questions? I think we're about ready to kind of wrap this up. If you have no other questions. All right, seeing none, we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you.